Good evening, all. Good evening as you join. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. Welcome. Let's wait for numbers to climb. Thanks for joining us. Good evening, everybody. Just numbers starting to stabilise. Very warm welcome. I'm Andy Tucker, speaking to you from Basingstoke in North Hampshire, about 20 minutes or so north of the Naturetrek office. Simon and Nikki are joining me from their home in Facinas in southern Spain. Great to see you two. Happy New Year, Simon and Nikki, and to all of you watching tonight. It's great that the concept of the wildlife travel webinar is alive and well. There's over 200 of you signed up tonight, and it's just a joy to bring these travel experiences to the warmth of your living room instead of asking you to venture on a cold, icy night. If you're in the north of the UK, I hope you're okay with the floods and the snow. It's been a bit strange in the south, a little bit of snow Sunday evening, but it all melted by about midnight Sunday night, and we've just had pretty much torrential rain since. But I know there's a lot of you in the north under snow and coping with flood waters, so hopefully you're all tucked up warm, maybe with a glass of wine or something hotter to keep you company this evening. Drop us a note in the chat. There's a chat function. Let us know where you're joining from this evening. We'll be with you for about an hour, although I'm not in a rush, and neither is Simon or Nikki, so happy to go at a leisurely pace, and we'll be answering questions at the end. Unlike last year, we're not having a break and an interval this year, just 1 hour straight through. And we're going to look at 4 topics. Simon's going to give us an introduction to flyway ecology and conservation to start with. Then Nikki's going to talk to us about the migration trips we do down there in southern Spain. Simon comes back on to go through the two continents trip, the trip that combines Andalucia in southern Spain with northern Morocco. And then Nikki will finish off the evening with a rundown of the trips that are based out of the lovely picturesque town of Ronda. Just before I hand over to the guys in southern Spain, let me just show you where they're speaking from this evening. I can just get my screen to share. So here we are, looking down at the southern portion of the Iberian Peninsula, where my red pin there is Simon and Nikki's village of Facinas. Just north of Tarifa, this is a big kite surfing capital. Just for reference, just over to the east here, here's the Rock of Gibraltar, and here is the Strait of Gibraltar. This is a major flyway, as Simon will tell us in a couple of minutes' time. And just 20 or so minutes northwest of where Simon and Nikki live is the base we use for lots of these trips. So see both Simon and Nikki's location, where they've chosen to set up home for themselves, and the base we use is right in the epicenter of some of the most productive birding in southern Europe. So that's setting the scene. If I can hand over to you now, Simon, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we'll get underway.
Okay, perfect. Let's see if we get the... Always nervous about this bit, yeah, right. But it always seems to work. So anyway, it's working. That's perfect. Okay, well, Happy New Year to everyone.
Perfect. Yeah, great.
Hopefully you can see that well. And yeah, so I'm just going to run through first off to set the scene, if you will, about some of the ecology, some of the telemetry work we're doing here, and some of the conservation work here at what is the epicenter of migration in the East Atlantic Flyway. So the reason for that is because this is the narrowest point between Europe and Africa. At its narrowest point, it's just 14 kilometers wide, and that brings a host of different soaring migratory birds here. And the reason why they do that is because they really do not want to cross the sea. They rely on thermal flight, so thermals are forming over the land, but they're not forming over the sea. So they have to come here, and it's actually a fluky combination of the geology, so the closeness of the two continents, the hillsides, but also the wind as well. And we have two winds here, either the Levante wind, the easterly wind, or the Poniente. And this wind is actually the raptors or soaring birds, generally the soaring birds are actually using that to get them over the last bit. So if you can imagine these birds soaring up as high as they can over the land and then going out over the sea, it must be absolutely nerve-wracking for them, especially if they're doing it for the first time in the autumn, as juveniles are. And what's happening when they do that, they're dropping really, really rapidly. Because there are no thermals there. They cannot catch those thermals, and their wings are big. They're designed for that thermal flight. They are not designed for flapping flight. So they have to come to this point to make that crossing. What they do is actually turn into the headwinds. So it's a side wind from one way or the other. And they turn into that to give themselves lift to get them just over that last few kilometers, maybe, depending on the conditions. So this is why these birds are coming here. But it's also a great place for smaller bird migrants. Many of them cross at night, but also cetaceans as well. This is a meeting of different currents from the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, which gives an upwelling of different life in the sea and brings lots of predatory sea mammals to feed upon that as well. So Andy mentioned it where we are. This is the dot is where we're sat right now in Fasinath, just around the corner from Tarifa, which Tarifa is the narrowest point. It's the southerlymost point of Europe. And actually, a lot of people think that most of the migration goes through Gibraltar, but actually very little. So you can see from this map that Gibraltar is set back around the corner, and you have to have a certain wind for the birds to cross at that point. In actual fact, they cross down through there and actually cross back across that bay, that Algeciras Bay, to cross somewhere near there rather than go out through Gibraltar. Some do, but most are coming down through this stretch. And it depends on the wind at which point along the coast they're leaving from, or in the spring coming into as well. So numbers, this is actually numbers from a couple of years ago. This is my friend Alejandro with Tag Hair behind, surrounded by black kites. And yeah, if you get it right and you're at the right point, you can be surrounded by birds at really low altitude, struggling with the wind, struggling to catch those thermals to get enough height to make the crossing. And some birds will come back, recirculate and try again, maybe try several times. So in the autumn, these are just autumn figures. So we're talking 521,000 soaring migratory birds. And of those, this has actually increased a bit as well, 150 odd thousand white and black storks with 37 different species involved. So, and that's just the soaring birds. We are seeing other birds crossing as well. So, and when you're in amongst it, you're counting, it's very hard because people often ask us how we count these birds crossing the straits. Well, here Alejandro is checking what birds are actually recirculating and coming back. These are all black kites, by the way. And this was a day where we counted 20,000 crossing the straits. And you see from the sea conditions there, there's quite strong winds. So a lot of birds were recirculating. So we have to watch intently and carefully to make sure we're not double counting. We're actually counting only birds that are crossing. So the organization that does this work is Fundación Migres. We work alongside Fundación Migres, who monitor the migration here, counting birds and also doing other monitoring techniques, which I'll come on to in a moment, during the autumn. And that runs, our autumn starts in July in earnest as well. So it starts in July, mid-July, big numbers of white storks mostly, and then more black kites, and then it goes into the eagles, honey buzzards, and other species. And then it goes into vultures. So actually our autumn starts mid-July, goes through to about December. And then actually by December already, even November, birds are starting to come back the other way. One of the other things that Fundación Migres do, and this is actually a young griffon vulture with another one, young one behind it. And the griffon vulture migration, it's the only place you can see it here in the Straits of Gibraltar. And it's actually not really a migration, it's a youth dispersal. But one of the things that griffon vultures are particularly prone to doing is colliding with wind turbines as are other raptors as well. But actually Fundación Migres worked on a technique of actually being able to switch off these turbines to allow the birds safe passage. So they train ornithologists who work 365 days of the year in all daylight hours. And they're able to switch off individual turbines, groups of turbines, or the whole zone if there's a threat of birds coming towards those turbines and a threat of collision. And this has been super great because you're able to have clean, renewable energy because of the winds here, but also the birds are able to have safe passage as well. So it's really worked for birds. In actual fact, before they did this in the original turbines where they couldn't switch them off, which were placed here before the designation of the area under the EU Habitats Directive, there are about 370 collisions of griffon vultures annually. So, and that it immediately was cut as soon as they started doing this technique. Now it works perfectly for these soaring birds, but also a whole range of different soaring migratory birds that need to cross at this point. So among the soaring birds, we also have monitoring of the seabirds passing the straits as well. And I was saying about the cetaceans coming here, but also that attracts a lot of seabird migrants as well, whether they're wintering here, like this gannet, or whether they're actually on passage. So some of the scopoles and cories shearwaters are winter here, but all of the population of Balearic shearwaters will cross through the straits on their way to the Mediterranean or to the Atlantic. So it offers us a unique point to be able to actually count the numbers going in and out of the Mediterranean, so we can have a better understanding of the population changes of this really threatened seabird as well. So of those 21,500 Balearic shearwaters, there was an additional program during May and July of counting those birds. So an additional 27,000, over 27,000 were counted as well. So those numbers above are actually autumn numbers of passage seabirds, not spring. This is where it gets a little bit confusing because these are birds we do count and we do monitor as well with Fundación Migres work. But these passerine migrants, a lot of them are actually crossing at night, but these are the ones we observe during the day crossing. So over nearly 450,000 passerine migrants. But again, apart from the swifts, a lot of these will be passing over at night, and we hear them going over at night. In actual fact, there's some work where we actually, if there's a full moon, Alejandro and his team will stare at the moon with a telescope and try and identify the silhouettes passing past it, which sounds pretty intense and hard on the eye as well. So you can imagine looking at the moon for that long. If you've ever done it, it really obliterates your night vision. One of the species that is often, I think, kind of overlooked as well by visiting birders, but it's one that if you've been on a tour here, you'll probably hear me go on about a lot, and that's the black kite. And this is a juvenile black kite. Now, black kites are quite a globally common raptor species, and in Iberia, they've increased a lot, but there are threats to that population as well. But they're one of the most numerous raptors that cross here at the Straits, and it's possible to see 20,000 in a day. As I said earlier, those days are pretty awesome when you get this large concentration of them because of the wind. They can't cross. Maybe the wind is too strong, the conditions aren't quite right. So you'll get these birds coming to the Straits and realizing they can't cross. And I wonder, like for this juvenile that would have been making this crossing for the first time, whether they think it's like that the whole time, this really strong Levante winds, almost hurricane force, and they have to wait, and you get these huge numbers. So we can expect over 220,000 of them crossing in the autumn. The numbers are increasing though. We see like numbers like this. Is locally we refer to this as the Milanada. It's a kind of kite fest So you've got kite surfers on the beach, and you've got you're surfing the wind, black kites above as well. It's pretty awesome to see this. And this is something that's happening from mid-July onwards. You know, you get valleys where the birds have roosted, like here, and they start leaving the roost as soon as the thermals start getting up. They're trying to catch those thermals riding the wind. Often you'll see juveniles are really restless. They seem to want to go in some crazy conditions, and they actually take the longest route sometimes in those really bad conditions. But often as well, you'll see at the roost sites like this valley here, you'll see an adult sat on the ground roosting with several juveniles around it. Kind of summarize that. Maybe those juveniles are actually watching those adults. And if you watch them, as soon as the adult gets up, they get really restless and they start getting up. The adult comes back down. Oh, we're not going yet. So you see that quite often in these big concentrations, that black kites are very intelligent birds. And well, they definitely work together as well. But one of the things that is really interesting here, because we're getting this large concentration of black kites, and they're on their way to sub-Saharan Africa to spend the winter in the Sahelian region of Africa. But when the wind is strong, as it was here, and Sam's, we've processed this bird, we've taken biometrics from this bird, and we're about to release it. Sam's releasing it into the headwind, so it can immediately get height, and there's no danger of it crash landing, and there it goes into the headwind and drifts away in the wind. And this gives us a really unique ability to be able to study the populations, so where these birds are coming, because this is a very prolonged migration of black kites from mid-July, but it goes right on into October. And different populations now we know have different wing morphology, but also we're able to take blood samples from some of these birds as well. And there's a Czech ornithologist that's been doing a study here on the blood of black kites. And what they found in the blood is two very unique strains of bacteria that are new to science. They've never discovered these before. And we think they pick this up from rubbish tips in the Sahel. And it's really interesting because they don't seem to show any ill effects from carrying it, but it's interesting that these new forms of pathogens or bacteria are present as these populations increase, and these birds are utilizing these kind of artificial food resources across their migratory flyway as well. The other species you can see here is the white stork in huge numbers, sometimes in groups of 1,000 strong, and they actually work together. And it's a mesmerizing thing to see when you see them together, because they form these huge groups. And often if I go to the supermarket, people will stop me, not that they maybe know me or anything, but they stop me and say, did you see those white storks earlier over the car park? And this is actually over the supermarket car park in Tarifa at the Lidl's. If anybody's been on the tour with us, maybe we stopped there because it's the best Lidl's in the whole of the Western Palearctic for migratory birds. And yeah, you might be able to see a black kite interloping in a moment. But what these birds are doing, they work a lot more together than any other migratory species of the soaring birds. There's the black kite there in the middle, drifting through and up to the right-hand side and low down. So they're actually utilizing thermals together, but each one there's been a lot of studies on white stork thermal migration, and each white stork is utilizing the best thermals that they can, but also watching their nearest neighbor. And without going into too much detail, there's been mapping of how these birds utilize these thermals, but also work together. So each one of those white storks is essentially a sensory node in a big sensory array of thermal sensing white storks. So they're utilizing that together, but also working together to find the best height and the best thermal hopping. So if you can imagine, these birds are hopping all the way down to the coast. It's like springs. So they're coming from one thermal to another, and then they have to decide whether they're going to take that leap. And the other problem for the birds when they're working together like that, if one goes, they tend to all go, but also the reverse is true. So if one bottles it and starts coming back, quite a significant number of that group will also come back. And we estimate between somewhere around 5% of the birds in a group will actually always come back. So in our counts, we actually account for that percentage of birds returning. One of the other things you can see here is actually birds wintering here. So white storks coming to winter here at nearby rice fields of Lahanda. Doesn't always look like this, sadly, at Lahanda. It's actually also a staging point for them because they feed in these harvested rice crops, but there's been a lot less rice recently because of political changes there, things that are going on, but also because of differing water levels. There's actually more than enough water in Lahanda if they were to flood it, which hopefully in the future they will, but might be long into the future. But these birds still, they're coming now, they're here now, and you can see maybe between 300 and 500 wintering at Lahanda at the moment. And yeah, it's pretty awesome to see because when the guys are harvesting or incorporating this green material, which they're actually this rice stubble into the water, they're churning up, and you see this massive conglomeration of life, and the white storks leading the pack and following the tractor, but all sorts of other things, glossy ibis, gulls, even some terns sometimes as well early on in the season. But the concentrations of the white storks are really interesting. And actually, for the people that spotted it, there's actually a ringed bird on the left there just flying in. And I think this bird is actually from Germany. I can't remember for sure, but I think this is a bird we logged that's from Germany. So, but yeah, we see a lot of colorings here, and we're able to see where those different populations are coming from. Just briefly about this, because I wanted to touch on the honey buzzard migration. So the honey buzzard migration in spring is pretty awesome because you can almost set your diary by it. So May the 6th is around the peak of honey buzzard migration. In the autumn, it's towards the end of August and the first week of September. But that first week of May, you get these huge numbers of honey buzzards coming. And for some reason, honey buzzards draw ornithologists from all over the world. People come here, you'll hear at least 6 different languages being spoken at the watch points, but everybody getting on in the love of these birds. And it's, yeah, I mean, I love them, but I love all the raptors. So I'm not sure why this one stands out for so many people, but unlike a lot of the raptors crossing here, most are going to the Sahel region of Africa. These birds are actually, they've got a really long journey. So some are coming even as far as Scandinavia. So I know you have breeding pairs in the UK as well, but some of them are coming as far as that and as close as central Spain. We don't have many in Spain breeding at all, but most from further north. And they're coming and they're crossing the straits at this point for the reason all the other raptors and soaring birds are doing it, but also they're going much further. So they're going to the moist forests of Africa. So if you can imagine the Sahara, and then below that, you've got this Sahelian belt, which is like a kind of acacia scrub, open plain kind of habitat. And then below that, you've got the tropical moist forests or the edge of that. And that's where these birds are going. So they have a super, super long journey, and they're a real globe-trotting species. But in spring, when they're coming back, you can get sightings like this when they're coming up, battling against the wind. They're super wind warriors as well. They can go at super altitude when the conditions are good, and you don't see them hardly at all. They're just specks up in this massive blue sky. But when the conditions are right, and normally they are in a week, you get these birds passing at eye level right in front of you. So it's for me, it's super fascinating to not only see these honey buzzards coming, but the ornithologists, their fan club coming as well. So, and actually there's more and more telemetry data on these birds as well. that we've witnessed most recently in the spring, where we've seen birds with geotags. Of course, one of the biggest birds crossing here, this is the short-toed eagle, and that's got a wingspan of 1.75 meters. So conversely to the honey buzzard, which is quite a short, compact, paddle-winged type raptor, this is a big bird. It's 1.75 meter wingspan, and it really struggles to cross the straits. And it's only 14 kilometers wide, but they really, really struggle. So often you can see them coming in and recirculating because they're just too low, and they really, really struggle. And sometimes in the spring you see sites like this. So this one is in the autumn. This one's actually coming back, and this one's in the spring. It's coming back in a levante, the easterly wind, with a unusually very low cloud. So, and it was super low below us. And what this bird's done, it's soared up over the Moroccan coast, drifted out, and conditions have maybe changed when it's gone out as well. So, and the cloud cover came in. That's a problem in itself, but and the wind increased as well. So this bird may have been halfway into its journey when those conditions changed, and then it's stick or bust. So it goes for it. It's got to go for it. Sometimes they recirculate and come back even when they're halfway across. But this bird, it went for it, and many other birds following it as well. But it gives a super close-up view of them. But the challenge of just crossing 14 kilometers is just really, really shown with these birds, these big eagles crossing right in front of your eyes. And this one actually got a cheer when it came in. So just to demonstrate that, this is Ugo Maione's work from Italy. So they've satellite tagged several short-toed eagles in Italy. And just to show you how important the Straits is, so this bird could feasibly try and cross at the Straits of Messina, take the shorter route into Africa. But this is Michelle, and that was in 2019, crossed here, and then returned in the spring in 2020. But it just shows, look, it's gone up through the landmass of Italy, taken a left turn into France, down through Spain, just to get here to cross, which is a pretty mad long route around, but that's how delicate the crossing is into Africa. Similarly, Egadio's route was similar as well, just showing the autumn and the spring routes there, just showing how difficult it would be for them to cross at that Straits of Messina, a really, really problematic route for them over the sea. But coming here, they've got that 14-kilometer sea, bit of wind as well, which will give them uplift at the very end to make the crossing. So the other eagle we get here in big numbers is the booted eagle, and that's a very relatively short, compact eagle. It's about the size of a common buzzard, but also still has to come here. And I really like this story. So this is new. We've not told many people about this one. So this is a bird that was tagged by a project in northern Spain. We're in contact with a friend of mine now, Ignacio. We share a love of booted eagles, but we're actually on the lookout for tagged birds, and they're their tagged birds that they've tagged up in northern Spain. So, and it's really important for the guys to know how their tagged birds are performing, so they know the routes they're taking. But if they've got evidence from the field as well, it's really, really important to demonstrate tag condition, tag accuracy as well. And that's really useful for the project as well. So we've been doing some of that work. And actually, this is Maya. And Maya, I'm kind of in love with Maya because I saw Maya in May making the crossing. This is in spring. It was about midday, so there's a lot of distortion in the photo. You see her tags firmly placed on there, no problems with the tag. And the tag was performing super well because this is where she crossed in She actually was hatched from a nest up in, I think, near Castilla-La Mancha, I think in that area. And then she crossed in right next to my watch point near Tarifa there, because it was a moderate easterly wind. So I positioned myself there, and she crossed right in front of me. And so I sort of went on and tracked down Ignacio with the details of the tag. He provided me with this map of the bird crossing, and she spent the summer around Sevilla. Actually, you can just see where the track trails out there off the map. She actually hung around Sevilla. She didn't go back north at all. She stayed in the area. And then in August, I thought, there's another tagged booted eagle soaring over a different watch point. And I actually thought to myself, I was on my own actually, and I thought to myself, wouldn't it be lovely if it was Maya? Because she was similar. This bird was the same age. And so I phoned up Ignacio, and lo and behold, it was Maya. What are the chances of that? So she crossed, you can see her soaring around here. That's a soaring route on the Spanish coast. And she crossed at a place near, gosh, I'm trying to think of the area. Anyway, a watch point up the coast here near Pelayo. It's actually a permit only area. And she crossed right over my head again. And I actually said to Ignacio, wouldn't it be funny if this bird was Maya? And he came back with, well, I didn't believe him at first. So this is super interesting data, though, to understand where the birds are, how they're crossing the straits, how they're behaving in the wind. So you can see she actually goes towards Tarifa initially, but the wind's dragged her on the thermals up towards where I was. And that's actually where she crossed out right over my head. I saw her go. So she's now in the Sahel. She'll be on her way back soon. So maybe I'll see her again. That's a really, really nice thought. Booted eagles here. You can see many booted eagles crossing here, and often they will hang around with the short-tailed eagles and other birds in the valleys below you. So it's a really cool place to watch them, and you can get eye-level crossings like this. There's actually a bird in the autumn coming up through the valley, just about to make its crossing. Not that early in the morning. The good thing about raptor watching, you don't have to get up that early, because these birds are reliant on the thermals. I think maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock, this one. Yeah, we get in the autumn crossing about 34,000 booted eagles, for instance. So the other bird we get crossing here, which is unique to here as well, is the griffon vulture. And this is a griffon vulture that decided it didn't want to go just yet. And this is a wild bird. That's my phone camera. It's checking out there. And these young birds, they often crash land. I mean, this is a big bird. You know, it's got anywhere between a 2.3 to 2.8 meter wingspan. So a very, very big bird. And we see maybe over 10,000 of them crossing, but the numbers are increasing. And these birds often crash land. They get it wrong. These are juveniles making a youth dispersal. The adults, once they've made this crossing and come back, they never do it again. So these birds, the young birds, disperse from their nest. They're starting to breed at the colonies now as well already. So come late autumn, around November time, these birds start forming dense migratory or youth dispersal groups, and they will have to cross at this point. So the global population of griffon vultures coming to this point to cross here at the Straits of Gibraltar. And they do it. It's kind of an odd thing, really, because only the young do it. They go to the cell, that bit below the Sahara, for the first 2 to 3 years of their life. And then after wandering on a backpacking kind of exploration of themselves, they start coming back. And they come back, you can expect them back May, June time. I often see griffon vultures coming. And it's kind of like a conveyor belt, because if you imagine these increasing numbers of griffon vultures doing relatively well because of the increasing conservation work in the Iberian Peninsula in particular, they're crossing, and they're coming with them are birds like this. And this is a critically endangered vulture species, very similar to griffon vulture, but you can see this this kind of mottled appearance. This is a Rupel's vulture, and this is a bird now people are coming to the Straits to find, because it's actually super hard to even find it in the Sahel now because it's declined so much. But imagine all of these young griffon vultures coming to the Sahel, and very, very few declining populations of these African vultures like the Rupel's vulture coming and getting kind of caught up in this conveyor belt, if you like. And then when those returning griffon vultures come to Europe, they're actually bringing with them these critically endangered birds. And this is actually a bird that hung out at the local colony for quite a while. I don't think it's there now, but it was there from the spring right the way through the autumn. So I think it may have dispersed again or gone somewhere else. Maybe it's still around. It seemed to come and go, so maybe it's still in the colony. But this is really, really worrying in some ways. So it's nice that we're getting these birds, but at the same time, these critically endangered birds could be coming up and hybridizing potentially with griffon vultures, Eurasian griffon vultures in these colonies. We don't understand how these birds interact with the colonies. We don't know what they do, but we don't know their movements that well. But maybe telemetry data would tell us that. So we've been trying to tag birds, both colleague in Rashid in Morocco, and the guys here from Fundación Migres, Carlos and Alejandro, have been trying to trap these Rupel's vultures to tag them so we can better understanding that their movements in the Iberian Peninsula and maybe beyond. But also a question remained, did these birds actually return ever to the Sahel? Because you kind of think it's unlikely that they would. Well, Polzuela, she was tagged by the Vulture Conservation Foundation in Portugal on the edge of the Portugal-Spanish border. And she came to the Straits. She crossed it back after tagging back across the Straits and returned to Senegal. So we don't know if she came from there. We have no idea, but she certainly returned to the Sahel. And that's really interesting because there are two possibilities here. So one, these birds are coming, and maybe it's nice that they're kind of utilizing the conservation work of the European Habitats directives and conservation work in Spain. But also one of the problems is that maybe this sort of hybrid populations of these birds return or actually go to the Sahel, and then what happens? Do they start hybridizing with Rupel's vultures in their normally fairly sedentary, fairly resident populations? What happens? We just don't know. So it's a really important conservation question that we need to understand what happens next with this species. And this species also, which is now a new species, is actually, I think, the 7th record for white-backed vulture, certainly for Spain, but and Iberia, but I think maybe for Europe as well. But this is a bird I saw crossing, and it was tagged by Rashid. So Rashid in the Jebel Musa, just the other side, has a station where they're actually feeding vultures to try and capture these vultures to tag them, both understanding the movements of griffon vultures, but hopefully understanding more about these two species, the white-backed vulture, this one, and the one you saw before, the Rupel's vulture. So this is the map kindly supplied by Rashid from the centre at the Jebel Musa. They're doing some wonderful work there in conservation, but also tagging. And this tagging data is really interesting. So this is GA03, and it returned to the Jebel Musa and made a crossing. So it soared up over the Jebel Musa and really made a really direct crossing. And this was a moderate, it was really good conditions as well. Look at the straight angle of this. Being dragged slightly by the easterly wind at that point, you see it. And then exhausted, here it lands right in front of me. And that's that little bend in the map there. And then it soars, takes off. That was the photo I took of it landing right in front of me. Couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. And then it continued on. into the mountains just above the Straits, and we continued on into central Spain. And sadly, GAO3 didn't make it, so we don't know quite what happens. We know the tag stopped, and we think it didn't survive. It seems to be the kind of right behavior from the tag that something happened to that bird. So unfortunately, we won't know if that GAO3 will ever make it back, but presumably not, because it's died, sadly. But it does give us a unique data set from the bird crossing, but also maybe in the future more birds will be tagged like this and give us more insights into these critically endangered vulture species that are declining so rapidly in their normal area. Anyway, I just wanted to finish on this, because being surrounded by soaring migratory birds is a special thing that we love to share. Not only the conservation, the tagging, the monitoring work, but also just the sheer joy of just being in amongst a soaring migratory group of white storks like this, for instance. Over to you, Nikki.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Simon. That was super awesome. You've gone maybe slightly over the 15 minutes that we talked about, but that was just really cool to watch. It's a great introduction to a place that we love, a place that we've chosen to base ourselves just because of the stuff like that happens. Particularly love the bit of the tagging of GAO3 and that little bit where you can see the exact moment that it landed in front of you on that cliff top where you'd been waiting for just the right day and just the right moment, and that absolutely paid off. So that was really cool. So the good news is that you too can enjoy a migration spectacle such as this. So I'm just gonna fairly quickly whiz through some of the trips that we lead here, which are kind of become loosely known as the Cortijo collection because of the beautiful place that we base them in. So we have go slow trips to experience both the spring and autumn migration. In the autumn, we also have another trip that's slightly shorter, a 5-day one, and slightly longer in 10 days. Also, relatively new offering, we enable people to experience the honey buzzard migration that Simon was talking about. And also we have some quite unique and difficult to see species that live in this part of Andalucia during the summer as well. So when we first moved out here, I think there were maybe 2 trips, and we often say every day is a good day in the Straits, and happily enough, Naturetrek are able to offer pretty much year-round experiences here. So we base ourselves, as Andy showed you on the map, you have Tarifa right down at the most southerly point of Europe, and we take you a little bit further west to a gorgeous Cortijo sort of restored farmhouse just outside the town of Vejer de la Frontera. It's just a beautiful place. It's so nice. It was pretty much derelict up until 1995, when it was kind of really lovingly and tastefully restored, and they kept all the original flooring and stuff like this. So now the rooms are all kind of based around this gorgeous central courtyard with, you know, orange trees, and there's a big sort of communal room off to the left where you can enjoy a beer or a gin and tonic or something and chat over the list in the evenings. Beautiful paddocks and outside spaces to enjoy as well. The owners, Eva and Jason, sort of quite into horses, but also have like this menagerie of all sorts of goats and chickens and stuff, which tend to join you at various inappropriate moments during the evening. It's also well, every time we go there, the food is just exceptional now, thanks to, in particular, to this unbelievable woman, Katerina, who I think she's about 25. She's already being headhunted by kind of big restaurants in Paris and things like that. But for us, she knocks out a bloody good paella and basically keeps everybody incredibly well fed, along with her partner, Fran, who's just like such a charming people person, always makes sure that everyone has exactly what they need for every meal. So it's just a really great place to base ourselves, to go and explore this kind of extraordinary coastline in particular, but all the other bits of the Straits. So most of the trips are the big focus is the migration, because it's just something so special that this area has to offer. And if it's not on your bucket list, then it should be, because it's, you know, as Simon shown, it's just breathtaking scenes and incredible nature in action. So to experience it properly, you have to really understand how wind and weather affects where the birds are leaving from in the autumn, or where they arrive to in the spring. Luckily, you know, we've had quite a lot of practice, and Simon's a bit of a wind whisperer himself, always knows exactly where to be at the right moment. So there's, I don't know, a couple of dozen watch points up and down the coast, and you have to be at the right one at the right moment. So every day is like a mystery tour. When we set off from the Cortijo, we never know exactly where to go. So luckily, every watch point is seemingly more beautiful than last. So in the spring, you might find yourself based here, which is quite far east, Punta Canero, which is back towards Algeciras and Gibraltar. Always you can see Africa just over there in the background. Or in a sort of moderately strong easterly, we might be up at La Peña. We've got some nice shades, normally a few donkeys knocking around to entertain us in the quieter points. Or sometimes we'll be up at Cascabel, which is like the roof of the world, and just this extraordinary view all along the coastline. And you find yourself really up amongst here. There's a group of black kites, almost kind of within touching distance of the groups. Really cool place to experience it. And of course, it's always a really good place to practice your raptor ID, because it's about repetition, right? So on the right days, you'll be seeing silhouettes of these birds when you shut your eyes at the end of the day, because you'll be seeing so many black kites going over. So always on hand to kind of help people learn and go away knowing a few more raptors than you when they arrived, or having learnt to age or sex them as they go. So people often ask, so which is better, spring or autumn? When should I come, spring or autumn? And it's like, which is better? It tends to be the one that you're watching at the moment, because they're both, it's like two ends of a story, right? It's if you come in autumn, then it's like this kind of, it's got like a festival feel. There's more birds, there's big crowds of birds amassing on the Spanish side of the Straits, getting ready to cross. Lots of birders from all over the world really gathered together as well to experience this. And you're really up in this kind of party atmosphere of, you know, I mean, you can see tens of thousands of birds crossing a single day, you know, on that sweet spot when it's been too windy for a few days. and everything's kind of hit this bottleneck on the Straits, and then suddenly it drops and everything goes on the same day. Those are, you know, that's kind of life affirming stuff, right? Again, the kind of millenadas, these huge sort of swirling birds of swirls of birds trying to decide what to do. Like, is this the right moment? Should we go now? And also the autumn, you get to see like the really fresh birds that have never done it before, you know, and black kites, the juveniles with these extraordinary fresh plumages, like they've just popped out of the box, you know. And birds that have maybe done it 2 or 3 times before, you know, they're kind of they're experienced now, and they know what they're doing. But then at the other end of the scale, when you come in the spring, of course, they've amassed on the other side, and they've undergone this kind of, can often be a really torturous crossing of 14 kilometers over the sea with no help from thermals and updraft to get there. And they take big risks in spring because it's this race, right, to get to the breeding grounds. They have to be back first to get the best place, to get the best mate. So you see the birds coming in super low, and quite sort of spread out, and you know, that kind of feeling of a flock is gone. It's like every bird for themselves, and we often find themselves kind of particularly the short-toed eagles in March, and the honey buzzards as well. You find yourself sort of cheering them, willing them to make it when they're only a couple of meters above the sea right in front of you. So, and we kind of, we've extended the spring season because, as Simon says, the honey buzzard migration is just, it's insane because they're so tied to day length, to photoperiod length, the trigger for them to migrate, that pretty much all of them, so we're talking sort of 60,000 honey buzzards, they're all going to cross pretty much in the first week of May. So it's a really good time to not only get underneath that spectacle, but there's a lot of really cool resident birds, breeding birds that are on site by then for in the area. So lots to see at that time of the year. And there's another one. Beautiful. It's a male.
It's nice.
It's nice. So yeah, other stuff, you know, the week is the theme is migration, but there's so much else going on. So the Straits themselves as a habitat is just awesome for cetacean watching. So for a lot of the trips now, certainly all the go slows, we head out with our friend Aurelio on his private yacht with Marina Blue in small groups. And we head out into the Straits, and it just gets you these incredible intimate experiences with our resident cetaceans and those passing through. So here's me, seemingly I've got very excited at getting that close to a pod of a mixed pod of you can see definitely common dolphin in the background and some striped dolphins closer to the boat. They know Aurelio, they know his boat now, and although there's no feeding happens in the Straits because it's a natural park, they just seemingly come because they want something to do. They want to come and say hi. So you get this. Longfin pilot whales we have resident in the Straits, bottlenose dolphin as well. And if you get on those super lucky days, you might get like so close to a fin whale, like the second biggest creature on Earth can be right there next to you, and that's just really fantastic days out. Loads of other bits of habitat to explore as well. We've got the fantastic marismas, the marshes at Barbate, full of lovely little things like this Kentish plover, or collared pratincoles. There's a colony of collared pratincoles with their funny faces. Just quite just unbelievably cool birds to see and get up close to like this. Oh, just yeah, fantastic selection. There's we often see a good deal of this is a slender billed gull, another one of my favorite photos of Simon's, actually. That's a beautiful photo. It looks like a fairy. But we also see a lot of Audouin's gulls there, and really just an ever-changing kind of selection of migratory and resident waders, gulls and terns. Really, really beautiful bit of habitat. Also, we head to the rice fields of Lajanda, which Simon also already mentioned. So this is a winter shot. This is kind of, right now, this is kind of our local patch. So there's a couple of thousand wintering cranes there at the moment. But it's a really good spot to see like really cool things like black-winged kite. We often see Spanish imperial eagle, Bonelli's eagle over there. Whole host of colourful stuff as well, like bee eaters feeding. Really great place to see big flocks of farmland birds too in the autumn. Corn buntings, Spanish sparrows, all manner of larks and things like that. It's another fabulous place to visit. Hoopoes, of course, forgot about that one. That is not making me hungry. Also, Los Alcornocales Natural Park is right on our doorstep. It's really, it feels like a tropical rainforest when you're in there. It's this extraordinarily humid cork oak forest, where all kind of grows in and captures the humidity that blows in from both of our Levante and Poniente winds, carry moisture off one or other sea, and this all kind of gathers as dew up in the hills and make this really extraordinarily moist forest in a part of the world that is the surroundings are quite arid by comparison. So loads of fabulous stuff in there, including two-tailed pasha, which is Europe's biggest butterfly. God, we do a lot, don't we? So we go also in the summer one, the Swift break, also based at the Cortijo. We head over to the eastern side of Doñana Natural Park, where we can pick up things like this gorgeous little swift. There's a colony of those that we visit. My personal favorite bird of all time, the red-knobbed coot. Please nobody say the word pustule because it makes me nauseous. Thank you. And top of many birders list to see is the what is it called now? Rufous-tailed bush
Scrub robin.
Scrub robin. I forgot to check what they're calling it now before I started the talk. Now, rufous-tailed scrub robin it is now. Gorgeous migratory birds that we find in there's an area in Trebujena where there's a cooperative of organic vineyards, and it's one of the few remaining strongholds of this bird, which is considered critically endangered in Spain. And it's just an absolute stomper. Beautiful bird with this kind of stunning tail that it kind of pops up, and it has gorgeous patterns on it. It's really cool. And of course, no trip here would be complete without visiting my mum's favorite bird, actually. Hopefully they've tuned in, I think. The northern bald ibis, which is just stunning, iridescent, charismatic, characterful, always just fascinating to watch. They were reintroduced here in 2018 after extinction from Spain 200 or 300 years ago, and they're doing really well here. They spread out from the original reintroduction site and occupied a quirky little colony just next to a road. And we can often find them feeding on nearby pasture land, just in amongst cows and cattle egrets, just kind of how it is supposed to be, just in there as a just looking comfortable in pasture land with relatively common birds, seemingly blissfully unaware that there's only about 1,000 of them left in the wild. So always a stunning bird to see. And happily, sometimes we'll get back from a day out and find a bunch of them waiting for us back at the Cortijo. So another great reason to stay there, and that's the cottage home collection.
Thanks.
I believe.
Over to me, right?
Over to you, Tonk.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a really unique experience, I think, and that's birding on 2 continents, but maybe more wildlife watching on 2 continents. So a lot of the things we do on some of those tours that Niki's highlighted, we actually do on this tour as well. So the wetlands visits, the vulture colonies, the passerine migrants in the Los Alcornicales. So, and it's also still a really good time of year to watch migratory birds as well. And so this tour, the Birding 2 Continents tour, is partly based in Spain, where you have your base, and partly based in Morocco. And that's really unique because we're at this gateway between the 2 continents. It's something we can offer, and it is really, really different culturally, food, but also the birding as well. So the birds are making their crossing, like this short-toed eagle, and actually they're still crossing way into October, which is perfect. And you'll see a lot of different raptor species at that time as well. It's a really good time to be here. But it's also a really good time for newly arriving wintering birds at some of the wetlands, like this blue throat. So some of the cranes are starting to arrive. Maybe the first ones will be here, but also different species arriving. So changing the scene of the Straits, it's a sort of, but the Birding 2 Continents time is like for me, it's the change into winter. It's the between autumn and winter, and it makes it really, really interesting to be birding here. A lot of hoopoes are making their way south. Some will winter here. Some will make their own crossing into Morocco and beyond as well. Actually, one area we go to, one time I saw about 30 hoopoes just in one area, which is around late October, which, yeah, it's pretty phenomenal to see that. I mean, it's always such an eye-catching species, but also one that people love to see as well. And this was actually taken, I think, in October. We base ourselves at a different place because it gives us a different feel, and we're able to do different things. And that's at the lovely woodland setting of Huerta Grande. And unlike Niki, I didn't do lots of pretty pictures about Huerta Grande. I just focused on the birds, which is probably quite normal for me. But imagine, if you will, it's actually in the valley of the Los Alcornicales, amongst cork oak forest and wild olive, and even in October there's a dawn chorus. There's dawn chorus there throughout the year. It's a super marvelous place to be. It's a real nature watcher's paradise, because it's just, as soon as you step foot outside your accommodation, you're in it, and it's beautiful. And there's birds passing overhead depending on the winds, vultures everywhere, and birds like this, a common firecrest, singing its high-pitched song throughout the year as well. And we also have bird feeders there. We put up bird feeders there. I worked with the guys there a really long time, and we have resident species like crested tit as well. But it's possible to see different birds passing, actually utilizing the forest before making their own crossing, maybe at night across the Straits. But they will utilize that area because the habitat is so super awesome there. But you can get photos like this of crested tit coming to the feeder while you have a cup of tea or a beer, whichever you prefer, and you watch the feeders. So on that, we also visit the wetland areas and the campo, the countryside around the Straits, where the northern board ibis are. Niki's discussed that, but
it's 2008, not 2018. I think it said 2018.
Yeah, so the reintroduction project originally was 2008, and they're doing quite well. Again, I put another photo of northern board ibis in simply because they're stunning looking birds. I think people often think they're ugly, but they were seen as being the symbols of splendor and the scribes of gods. And I think you can kind of see why when you take a different prism to it and look at them in more detail. And of course, I put it in there just because I know Niki's mum's watching and she'll be super happy to see a northern board ibis again. So that's a bird that kind of links the two continents as well, I think, as well. So we see this bird in Spain, but of course there's a breeding population in Morocco doing relatively well, doing a lot better than it was. We don't visit that area. Well, we don't need to because we also already saw it in Spain, but we go across. But also at this time of the year as well, in the Campo areas, it's possible to find rarities. From October, November, it's a really good time to find different birds coming to winter here, but sometimes birds from maybe further east. So this is a little bunting. And actually recently we found that wintering populations of flocks of wintering bunting not far from us here. This is one I took last year, but we don't know for sure how many there were. They were feeding in very dense stubble. There were at least 17 ringed. The guys ringed them to see how many there were, but also to understand their distribution. And is this a new wintering area? They're back again this year. Maybe they were there for several years and we just didn't realize. But we were seeing birds that weren't ringed. So the numbers, there were a lot more than just 17. So, and also with them, rustic buntings as well. Really pretty looking bunting. They both are. This is a bird that breeds normally in the near Arctic Russian tundra taiga area, as far west as Finland, and then actually winters in an area in the Indian subcontinent, that kind of area. So it's shouldn't really be wintering here, but maybe it's a indication of range expansion and changes in the population. Anyway, super interesting that we're getting them here. So you maybe would be able to encounter that on the two continents trip, a rarity such as that. But as soon as we make our own crossings, so we go on the ferry, take our vans across, you'll see, hopefully, seabirds and cetaceans from the ferry, depending on the time we go, and dependent on the ferry. Sometimes you have to be indoors because of the conditions. But anyway, we go across, super quick crossing, just to get across that little divide between the two continents. And you step off the ferry, go through passport control, all of that stuff. You get out, short drive up to a truck stop. It seems the most unlikely place to go birding. People know us there now anyway. And it's a great place for second breakfast. So we have second breakfast. And actually for many, this can be a highlight of the tour for them. So, but as soon as you step out of the vehicle, you're watching birds that don't look quite right. And this is a blue tit, but it's actually a different species. It's the African blue tit. And look, it looks like somebody got a blue tit and coloured it in twice. And you'll see African chaffinches around there, North African chaffinches and other species as well, all whilst stood there and watching raptors come in, making their own crossing right in overhead as well. So it's it is kind of mind-blowing to a lot of people when they stop at this truck stop. And it is actually a super picturesque place anyway. From there, after our second breakfast, we take the journey down the Atlantic coast. So imagine that tip of Morocco. We do a little triangle of that tip. So Morocco is a very big country. And this is a lot of this areas that we actually do this tour in is quite undiscovered, really. Together with Naturetrek, we pioneered this concept of birding on two continents. But one of the well-known areas is this area, the Mergozerga Lagoon. We take a little boat out, sometimes several boats, depending on numbers, out into the lagoon itself. And if you know the story of the slender-billed curlew, this was actually a wintering area for slender-billed curlews. Sadly, the slender-billed curlew is now extinct. And one of the reasons is because of the development of soft fruit production on the hinterland and the marshes around the area, which is all for export and destroying the future of agriculture there in the future. However, the lagoon itself is absolutely jam-packed with life. It's full of migratory birds, wintering ospreys, huge numbers of greater flamingos, every shore bird you could think of migrating down through this East Atlantic flyway, but also a huge array of different terns. So marsh terns, both black and whiskered, and ones that people really want to see in particular, like lesser crested tern, like this guy here. And being in the boat, you can get super close to them as well. If you're quiet, you can just drift towards them and get super nice photos for the photographers, as well as just brilliant views as well. On those marshlands where the slender-billed curlew used to also winter is another really endangered species. So globally, the marsh owl, this is a marsh owl, globally it's not endangered at all, but this is a isolated subspecies population. So imagine the other populations are south of the Sahara, so they're completely isolated from one another. So this subspecies of marsh owl is only in this area, and it's declining really rapidly. And if you want to see this bird, you need to see it quickly. So I never know when will be the last time that I take people to see it. So we're super respectful of this bird, because sometimes people have gone in, particularly local guides, and they flush them even off nests. So this is partly the reason why we have this tour in October. So we don't want to be disturbing any of the birds during the nesting season, but also we want to be able to see big conglomerations of them. So they come together in these roosting areas, and we can stand at the side of a field and actually see them coming back into these roosting areas, which is a really cool way to see them. Actually, really, it's a really beautiful way to see them, because you're not disturbing them. They're doing their own thing. But yeah, but one of the problems is this march of agriculture down onto these marshlands, all for export. Anyway, it's a super charming bird to see as well. It's really beautiful. It's kind of like the size of a short-eared owl, kind of similar, but with that smoky kind of beautiful appearance. Really stunning bird. In the woodlands that we then come from the coast, we go across the Rift Mountains, up into the woodlands of the Bourshim forest, where you might be able to find Leviant's green or Leviant's woodpecker. This one didn't sit on a nice tree. It sat nicely on a telegraph post. But this forest is really interesting. It's one of the biggest cork oak forests, and it's an area that's not really discovered ornithologically that much. So it's a really interesting place to go birding. But we also find some of the birds that we expect, like Leviant's woodpecker, but maybe we find other things too in that woodlands. One of the species we often encounter there as well is the Atlas long-legged buzzard. And this is a bird that's undergone a bit of a massive taxonomic debate at the moment, but I'll not go into too much detail about that. But it is super different to common buzzard in that it has this rufous tail and relatively long wings. But maybe if you're very familiar with common buzzard, you'll see the different patterning without that crescent on the chest as well, on the breast, and very rufous appearance. The other species that we encounter, and this is a really lovely way to see true wild endemic Barbary macaques, and there are several troops in the Bourshim forest, and you can see them, unlike in Gibraltar where they're kind of zoo animals, really. They pinch your food and all that kind of thing. These animals behave completely differently. You see them going about the way, just turning over stones and searching for beetles and other things and seeds. And sometimes, if you're quiet, they're super nervous of people as well, for good reason. They've been persecuted for all sorts of reasons in the past, but they will come close as well if you're quiet and they don't see you as a threat. And this one was actually feeding, this young one was feeding right next to us and came really, really close to the group. So really, really beautiful. Some of the wetlands as well in the areas you go down the coast, it's possible to find wet areas of Leucos wetlands. Kind of got this in the wrong order because actually we did a Leucos before the Bourshim, but it's possible to find species like marble duck, white-headed duck, red-knobbed coot. Those sort of Iberian species that people really want to see can be quite commonplace on some of the marshlands, on the coast as well, if you hit it right. But one of the birds that people really want to see, particularly in this stunning mountain setting as well, is the Musier's redstart. And we go up this area called the Talasantan National Park. We go up in 4x4s. It's actually a really exciting journey up. And we have a friend of ours, Ibrahim, who does it every day. And he's a really good mate. And he sets up kitchen in the mountains. So we have tea and picnic whilst watching Musier's redstarts, as different raptors go overhead as well, and different species can be found on the mountains, like black wheat ears, blue rock thrushes, and other things. But this is the star of the show up there. Once we've seen that, we can relax and then have a nice cup of tea. In the valleys below the Talasantan, we actually stay in this beautiful old watermill. And the area around it is super stunning because you can find different species and species that are making a little bit of an advance northwards as well. So when I started this tour, I kind of thought it unthinkable to be finding black crown chakra all the time, but this is black crown chakra near in the very north of Morocco. So actually on our 2 continents trip. So it's a bird we hear a lot, super shy, but sometimes we get views like that as it creeps up the bush and sees what's going on. Hopefully, if you're joining us, you'll get a view like that. The other species as well, that's now a new species, relatively new species, other species of owl that you can find at the accommodation there, is the Maghreb owl, or Maghreb wood owl. It's very closely related to the tawny owl in Europe, but it's now been split, and you might be able to see the difference. Of very grey appearance. It's quite different and sounds a little different too.
Oh, it's me. Thank you again. That's an awesome trip. Really kind of enjoy reliving it through the photographs. So we've done that one quite recently. That's one of our autumn trips that we do. And yeah, just love it. It's just always different, always very special to just cross over to this beautiful bit of the world that we sort of look at across the sea almost every day. Also sort of kind of ended up doing this in calendar order a bit, because also following on from that, probably the next one after that is in kind of late October, early November. We start to kind of spread out and explore a nearby but very different base. So I'm just gonna the time's just kind of run away, so I'm just gonna whiz through and introduce you a little bit to the area that we explore around the Serranía de Ronda. So you don't have to be. Oh, hi Siri, sorry. You don't have to be nuts about migration to come here, but it helps. And this October-November trip is actually based around, we designed it around the peak of the griffon vulture migration, youth dispersal, whatever you want to call it, which Simon explained earlier, when all of the griffon vultures that have bred in Western Europe, or sorry, have fledged in Western Europe that year, that are heading south to kind of come of age in Africa, will pass through the Straits of Gibraltar. So half of this trip is actually based in the Straits again. And it's phenomenal because, again, the birds, the wingspan of a griffon vulture means that it's incredibly limited to which days it can cross the Straits, right? Because it's so tied to soaring flight. The conditions have to be spot on. So the 10,000 or so that cross each autumn, often they'll go, over a period of a couple of days. So you can be in a place and the sky is just full of them, and if given that each bird weighs about 10 kilos, you can be in amongst literally a ton of vultures right above your head at any second. really stunning birds. We see them every day, but I never get tired of looking at those. And again, we'll be trying to always put ourselves just kind of as close to that migratory flow as we can get, like kind of enjoying them, finding the thermals that they need to cross to Africa. And autumn is a great time to be in this area because kind of round about Halloween time, all kinds of ghoulish creatures come out into the night, like this. It's a Gibraltar fire salamander, which is they're doing all sorts of incredible things with kind of amphibians at the moment. So that's now, I believe, considered a separate species to other fire salamanders in Europe. So we can see that in Los Alcornocales Natural Park after the first rains of the autumn. But then the other half of that trip, we base that way up in the mountains. So if you know this part of Spain at all, or if you remember Andy's map, then you see Malaga is just east of us, 2 or 3 hours east of us. And north of Malaga, you go an hour away from the Costa del Sol, and it's just a completely different story. You're just surrounded by these phenomenal mountain landscapes. We base ourselves here in the village of Huthcar, which is you can see it's blue rather than the traditional white, because it was hosted the Smurf movie back in the 90s and chose to keep its colour. So you've got these beautiful rolling hills covered in chestnut forests, incredible night skies because there's hardly any inhabitants up there. You know, it's all just tiny villages, most of which are half deserted anyway. And we go there because, as well at this time of year, as well as the kind of traditional north-south migration, you also have this kind of altitudinal and migration and southern shift of mountain birds. So it means we can get up there much easier in amongst things like blue rock thrushes, black wheaties, rock petronia, and even alpine accenta. We sometimes get pushed down into those hills above Ronda. And Iberian ibex as well. We often get to see some really close encounters with pretty cool mammal. But that base also puts us within, so that's kind of in the October-November trip. We focus on the kind of mountain birds and then head down to the Straits for the griffon vulture migration. But a couple of years ago now, we started a new trip because we realized how that base puts us within very close reach of some extraordinarily productive birding. I sort of almost think of it as like you can reach a lot of the same things that you might reach on a trip to Extremadura, for example. So in February now, we run a tour that is entirely based in the village of Huthcar. And from there, it's really fascinating how many different habitats you can get to in a very short space of time. So one of my favorites to go to is there's a huge inland salt lake, a high altitude salt lake called Fuente de Piedra, which is home to the biggest breeding colony of flamingos actually in Spain, and the second biggest in Europe, only just after the Camargue. It's also a great place to see some of those really rare, stunning looking wildfowl, like the endangered white-headed duck, and they also considered critically endangered in Spain, the marble duck, of which it's doing a lot better. And I think they counted 105 females last year, with a total of about 800 chicks pootling around after them. So, but still just a stunning duck, that kind of, love that smoky eye makeup look. We also head right up into these stunning sort of limestone crags. So this is the village of Grazalema, with the Grazalema National Park there in the background. Up there we can hope to see more of the mountain birds, also things like red-billed chough. We have Eurasian black vulture up there, Bonelli's eagle, golden eagle, and just stunning scenery. In February, you know, the almond blossoms are coming out, and the first of the earlier orchids are coming out, and it's a beautiful place to be. And we can always find a gorgeous spot for one of our picnics, which hopefully some of you might have experienced. We love to kind of pack our trips with really excellent local produce, to give people a real sort of flavour of the area, in particular the cheeses. Quite a big fan of cheese. We can also from there explore the kind of low intensity farmland. There's some a lot of it's, you know, as bad as it is all over Europe, but there's areas that are being managed especially to increase the kind of abundance of you know, arable plants and large-bodied insects in particular, because that then gives us the opportunity to track down the very fragile but still remaining population of little bustards that breed there. I actually took this photo in May, but it's in the spot that we visit during the trip. And also here's a slightly heat distorted but still quite charming video of the a group of great bustards that we encountered up there. I think that was just over a year ago, sorry, last February. So yeah, really diverse places that you can explore from that cute little blue village. And the other big thing about this tour, which we launched it as one of Naturetrek's vegetarian vegan portfolios. This is our rather lovely tame chef Ivan, who is cordon bleu trained. He's worked in some of the top restaurants in London, and he went from kind of or shall we say vegan skeptic to absolutely embracing this challenge of providing really 6 excellent 3-course meals that are entirely vegetarian or vegan, depending on the requirements of the group, but like always just a fantastic option for everyone. And okay, now I'm hungry. So just the stuff that he magics up is extraordinary. So like these chickpea crepes with do you remember that? Yeah. Oh, the kind of sesame and soy sauce courgettes inside. Filo pastry. This is cashew cheese inside the filo pastry, and just this thing that man can do with strawberries, like just amazing. And also one of the things, I don't know if it's unique to Naturetrek, but there is actually, as part of the trip, he does a cookery demonstration, which you can get stuck into what he's preparing after. He's actually nationally quite famous in Spain. He's known as Señor Castaña, Mr. Chestnut, because he uses a lot of local produce from the hills around Huthcar. One of the big things being chestnuts. So he's really specialized in producing amazing things with chestnuts, which if you join us, you'll get to not only watch being prepared, but also eat at the end of it. So what could be better than that, really? So I think we're well out of time. So Simon insisted that I put a picture of a black-eared waiter at the end because they're gorgeous. So yeah, that's it. We hope you enjoyed the whistle-stop tour of our little bit of corner of the world.
Thank you so much, Simon and Nikki. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I've been working with you on this product for what, 12, 15 years or something? I don't know, maybe even more. And yeah, it just comes across as fresh, and your passion for the area shines through there. And it makes me want to go and experience some of that. Well, food, bird, scenery myself. Fantastic job. So thank you very much. A lot of people have stayed with us throughout the evening. There aren't many questions at all, really, but I did see one from Mark. Thanks for your question, Mark. Simon, how do you catch and tag a vulture?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Yeah. So it's similar with the black kites as well. So we often set up a feeding station. So if you can imagine this big aviary that's been set up, netting around the outside so the birds don't hurt themselves or anything like that. So there's netting around the outside of it, and then we bait the birds get used to there being food there after a while, and then we bait a trail up into there. And as the birds they start hopping and wandering in, and we've got some friendly butchers in Tarifa who actually supply us with some of that as well, some of the waste that they wouldn't otherwise use. And actually we did a live from that feeding station at one point back in lockdown.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But what we do is you've got 2 doors and you have to wait, and you've got to be super careful as well, because if you can't pull it shut really quickly or anything like that, just in case a bird comes out. So you've got to very gently close the door very slowly while they're not looking, while they're just intently feeding. And then you have to go in and pick them up, which is and they have a stress reaction, which is they vomit all over you. So that's yeah, that's how you ring one. But then the worse for the wear. Sometimes actually we do this, and birds they know that what's happening, particularly black kites, and we ring the black kites, and we know sometimes they will come back for food afterwards, knowing, okay, it's going to be a little stressful, but I get a free meal out of it. So
yeah, great stuff. Lots of thanks from people coming in on the chat. Thank you, folks, for leaving a comment there. Lots of people wishing us Happy New Year. A couple of people, well, quite a few people saying they've enjoyed previous visits to Spain with you both. I have to say, Naturetrek, lots of our tour leaders build up quite loyal followings. You go with a tour leader who, as you all know, makes or breaks a tour like this. And if you enjoy someone's companionship, you are keen to travel with that leader again. And Simon and Nikki do have a very loyal clientele base with Naturetrek clients. So my advice is, if you fancy getting over to Spain or the 2 continents tour, book early, because the tours do get filled quite quickly. And that's testament to their passion in the field and their love of food and birds, and finding the birds, knowing the conditions, as you both touched on in your presentations. And more than anything, I think just being good fun to travel with, just building that camaraderie and team spirit. It makes for an enjoyable holiday. So in the absence of any other questions, I'd like to thank you once more for joining us all this evening. Much appreciated. Thank you, Simon and Nikki. Really good to catch up with you, albeit virtually, not in the flesh. Keep up the great work for us. And who knows, some of the people joining us tonight might be booking with you to travel with us through 2025. So thanks very much. Good evening, everybody. And thank you again.
Thank you. Hope to see you all soon.